Okay, we've all seen the scene with Tony Stark and Jarvis, and everyone is racing to build their own Jarvis right now. Now, this isn't a new phenomenon. Ever since ChatGPT came out, people have been trying to build a Jarvis. But most of this stuff fails. You've probably already gone through two or three tutorials trying to build this thing out, and inevitably you hit a dead end. And I know the reason why this happens. So in this video, I'm really just going to explain my take on this whole Jarvis trend, why I'm getting sucked back into it and starting to build out my own Jarvis right now, and some of the things that I'm just noticing. So this is not like a tutorial video. There's enough of those out there. And I'm not going to walk through each step by step how to build this thing. If you are somewhat savvy with Claude Code and Codex, you can figure this out. If you want my detailed way of how I implement this because you like the way I think, you like my approach, you can just simply look in the description of this video. I have exactly how you can get started with my approach. But I did want to talk at a high level what Jarvis is, what are we doing to build this, and how did we really end up here? So let's talk about a tweet that I came across the other day that went actually really viral on X, and it's from this guy called Zach Overflow, and he says in relation to this concept of running Claude code on a VPS, which is the primary way most people are running their Jarvis style agents. They're taking either Hermes agent or OpenClaw and then putting it on a VPS and running it from there. He says it's pretty easy, right? You rent a VPS, you get Claude to set it up for you, you copy over your dot files, you install all your packages, you set up your swap file and Z-swap, you lock it down with blocking all inbound traffic, use Tailscale SSH, throw up a tmux, use SSH, and by this point, you know I'm being very sarcastic. This is a lot of work, and this is just the beginning of this work. For Zach Overflow, he's probably really well versed in server management, VPS management, or he's been doing it for a while. He seems to be a developer. For most people who are beginners or don't really know their way around a server, this is a lot of work. And so what happened with the OpenClaw and what's happening now with Hermes agent, which is really popular, is everyone is rushing to set up a VPS with no idea of how to manage and maintain a VPS. This is not something that you just stand up and then never touch again. And if you're SSHing inside a box right now in 2026, literally the entire tech industry moved on from this. That's the whole point of AWS. We moved on to the cloud. So there's another backup here from levels.io. He's like a legend in the hacking space. He's built 95 companies and I think 10 of them is making a ton of money. But the reality is, again, someone like levels.io who lives and breathes this stuff, it's not an issue for him. He's going to send up a VPS, he's going to throw Claude code on it, and he's going to do whatever he wants to do with that. And you can see here his setup and how he gets that done. So I'm sure this is pretty simple for them to use. The reality is that when you go down this route of local stuff, you get into a lot of complexity very quickly once you start to hit these cases where it's not trivial anymore. And there's no real way to get you to understand that point beyond the founder of OpenClaw himself talking about this, where he's trying to hook up local models with OpenClaw. And he's just talking about, people say this is the greatest thing on the planet, but the models don't work once you hit this very specific use case here where there's 15,000 facts dumped into a single session. Now, to be fair, OpenClaw is a decent tool. Hermes agent is a decent tool, but these things were not designed with where we're going in mind. They were designed for the single player mode. They were designed for a time where the models weren't that great and we still needed to babysit them a bit. And so this OpenClaw project from Peter was one of his side projects. It just happened to blow up. Hermes agent is from a research lab, so there are a bunch of researchers, and they've built that entire program on Python, which has its own inherent problems underneath the hood. The reality is they have massively overcomplicated what it means to just build an agent. So I'm gonna just back up and give you the 10,000 foot view of what an actual agent is, and if we wanted to build a Jarvis today. Not the movie Tony Stark Jarvis. I think that's really cool, and I've seen a bunch of demos of people doing augmented reality stuff. I've seen people doing VR, AR, all that stuff is cool. What I'm really talking about when I say Jarvis is very much something that is one, accessible over a couple of channels. So you can text it, maybe you can send a message in Slack or Telegram, whatever you want. It's connected to your second brain, so you have all that information collected somewhere, either in a folder or on inside of database. Doesn't matter where you put it, it's just that it's collected. It's able to do a couple of things, which is like you can get these automated briefs that go across all of your sources. So it's able to search across all your sources and bring you back information. And the brief is one of the most common things where you can say, hey, what's the status of all my businesses today? And let me get a quick brief. It makes it pretty easy to go from a prompt to some type of automation. So you can say, hey, instead of you ad hoc pulling that brief, schedule out that brief to come to me every day at 8 a.m. And that should be pretty simple for the system to handle. And then the last step usually people take is they have some type of command center, some dashboard, or some custom UI. And this is what you're seeing with a lot of the setups where they have these really fancy knowledge graphs or these really fancy orbs that they're speaking to, these particle orbs. And you know what? That's a bit of fun. I'm not against it. I think it's just a bit of fun. So why not, right? It's not going to cost you that much in tokens to build out some of these UIs. Why not make it a bit fun for yourself? So when I think of a Jarvis agent, that's like the basic functionality for today that I'm thinking of when it comes to a Jarvis agent. So let's really get into like why these type of agents are popular right now, because this concept is not new. This architecture right here, or these functionalities, is not new. We've had this for at least 3 years at this point. You could do all this stuff 3 years ago. What's changed now is the models are really good and they're good enough to do this at a long horizon. And so instead of you having to handhold your baby Jarvis from 3 years ago, you can now just give it these really vague prompts and it can work through all of it. Claude is primarily the reason why these Claude models or Anthropics models are really good at tool calling, and they're really good at operating over a very long horizon, especially with Fable 5 coming down the pipeline. These type of agents are going to be really powerful. But why not just like stick inside of Claude code? So what's like the current architecture most people have today? And this is going to be a little bit technical, but bear with me here, because once you understand this piece, it's a lot easier to just build your own, especially for your particular use case. I'm talking to the folks where you've tried to use Codex, you've tried to use Claude. They're really good, but you're still stuck in that single player mode, and you need to move up into your agent always being on, always accessible to you, and it's inside of either your Slack workspace or via these voice commands. And you've tried the OpenClaw, you've tried Hermes agent, you've maybe even tried to do it in Claude code. But every single time you do it in these systems, you get to a point where everything starts to really break down and it's basically unrecoverable. So now you're stuck with a very janky, broken system that doesn't really work, and it's starting to just blow a lot of your tokens. This is just a common thing I've heard from a lot of people. There were a couple of AI consultants. What they did is they set up a service where they would help people basically do this thing here. And I'm going to get to this other side, but they would help people do this part here. And what they found out is everyone's setup is so slightly different that you can never really get to a good, repeatable way to set this up for someone unless you start to take on hosting responsibilities. And so this is where we move into the next type of architecture that's going to be required for these systems. It's going to be a managed architecture. So in this system here, you have your VPS that you are now responsible for managing, or maybe you have an automation guy responsible for managing. This is a full-time job. This is like a 40-hour-a-week job here, managing a VPS at serious size. That means something that's not just like a chat back and forth with an Obsidian vault. That's like very small. That's not what I'm talking about. If you have that set up and it works for you, good. But if you have a setup that's a little bit more complicated and you want to do a lot of different things, you're managing multiple businesses, you're managing multiple projects at once, and you need a lot of context back and forth, you have a lot of APIs that you're integrating with, then you do need to move beyond just the Obsidian vault connected to my Claude code, which is what I'm showing here, and a couple of APIs, because that breaks down very quickly over time. So a few weeks ago, this was not possible. Now it is possible. Number one is Vercel. So I don't have it in the picture here because I don't want to confuse you too much. This entire thing is hosted on Vercel, the managed agent. So we're going to put a Vercel link, a Vercel logo right there. So Vercel has released something called Eve, and Eve is their attempt to simplify what it means to build a managed agent. Instead of you being responsible for hooking up all these random channels and tools and skills via code or letting your agent code it out, it basically treats everything like a folder structure, which is how most of these agents are really able to comb through a lot of information anyway. So you know that with your Obsidian setup, if you have that set up, it's just a folder structure of markdown files. So the same principle kind of carries over here, which is Eve, your agent, your managed agent, is just a folder. That's all it is. And instead of just markdown files, we have special types of files. There's a JSON file here. There's a TypeScript file here. There's another one here. And inside of these files, there's a specific way to define an agent, a specific way to define a tool, a specific way to define a skill. What this gives you is very strong contracts for getting this work done. The agents are really good at reading a lot of this and setting it up very quickly. And what Vercel has done is build in all of the underlying infrastructure you need to run these agents without you needing to think about it. Workflows that need to be durable and resumable over time, retries that fail, integrating your Slack, integrating your Telegram, all these things are kind of just taken care of and really straightforward to do. So for example here, let's say we want to do a Slack integration. You literally just give your agent this page. So you can just give it this docs and it will tell you what to do. I think it's click one button and grab a key somewhere, and that's about it. And you're done. It's not really complicated. If you want to do it at the command line, you can, but you can just give your agents a way to do this as well. And so if we go back up here to the basic description of it, you'll see here that it has all these little code snippets and things. This is what your agent is going to read. You don't need to know anything going on here. You just need to know that your agent wants this level of instruction when it's setting up a managed agent. And the benefit you get is when you deploy this directly to Vercel. So let's see if we have some resources here. There's a template. So Vercel has these templates where you can deploy directly onto their platform these Eve agents. And you get basically a working agent out of the box. So I'm not going to deploy this because you've seen agents over and over again. So that's nothing new. But the reality is a project like this, when the first time I built a chat agent, this was before ChatGPT even had released really good APIs. So you had to reverse engineer this stuff from scratch. There was no helpful APIs for this. It was basically just a ChatGPT endpoint that you can hit and you would get back some completions. It took me, I think, 6 months to build it from scratch inside of AWS. Now it's literally one click. For you, maybe you haven't had to set up the entire infrastructure from scratch before on your own, but because this is like one click, add a couple of API keys here, it's absolutely insane the ceiling you can hit now. So because the barrier to entry is a lot lower, the ceiling is a lot higher at this point. So that is what is coming down the pipeline for Eve. I have been testing it and basically hammering it for the past couple of days here, and it's ready for sure. And Vercel has done a lot of work with big enterprise clients to test out the system as well. So I really trust that it is something that is hardened and ready for the public. So in reality here, what we're doing is we're doing a couple of things. One, we're making sure everything is going to be in GitHub now. What happens with this type of setup, this OpenClaw, Hermes, Claude Code, Second Brain, Skill, random APIs, none of this stuff is ever version controlled. What we do now is we take GitHub and then we take our managed Eve agent and we version control it. And it also deploys. So that means when you make a change to the agent, it automatically gets deployed up for you. You don't have to even think about the management of deploying a server as you would have to manage a VPS that is a server itself. And that is not a trivial thing to set up if it's not intuitive for you. Also, let's say we want to add a Slack channel. We can do that pretty easily. It's just basically a simple file that you have to add into the GitHub repo, and that adds Slack. So everything becomes managed in GitHub and versioned in GitHub. You can even put your second brain in GitHub. You can put the list of skills that you want in GitHub and APIs in GitHub. It's like working with a Word document and just having versions versus this side here is like you're saving all these weird file name versions. Everything's overlapping with each other. You're unable to keep state or keep track of what's going on. Because these were built mainly to be a personal assistant. That's the main thing. So a personal assistant is like a home automation tool. Turn on the lights in the garage when I get home at 6 p.m. Perfect use case for this stuff. This approach with Eve is more for the business-oriented or business-minded folks who want to run a more battle-tested system. And I think the one that's going to grab your attention the most is the talking voice stuff, which is really cool. Again, I'm not going to demo anything here because you've seen all of that already. It's a party trick, but it's also pretty cool. And the other piece I want to cover is the AI gateway. Okay, so AI gateway. What is an AI gateway? And you may have heard of OpenRouter. This is basically an OpenRouter alternative built for Vercel. Vercel has deployed this for everyone to use. You get the ability to use any model you want at pretty good rates. And this is what gives you the flexibility to say, hey, I want a text model, I want a coding model, I want an image model, a video model. It even has CDance 2.0 here that's available you can use. It has real-time speech that you can use for your voice mode, speech, transcription. It has everything here that you need in terms of working with models. The alternative is what a lot of people are doing is they're buying a Mac Mini, they're downloading the weights for a model, and then they're putting it on the Mac Mini and then calling it from there. This is great. It's free technically, but these are often really slow and hard to work with, and you're not even getting the best intelligence unless you have a beefy machine. Here you get all of it. It's one line of code change for your agents to understand. It's not complicated at all. And so what did I do here to make this really easy is I put all of the specifications inside of a GitHub repo that you can take and feed to your agent, and it will assemble up this architecture that I have been showing you. So what if that architecture changes over time and I make some updates to how this works? The reality is this bare bones structure here will not change for a very long time. This works, and the reason this works is because everything is file-based. Nothing here is that complicated because it's all just very standard contracts between things. So you don't need to change this, but you can add to it infinitely. Whereas in this scenario with these type of setups, all of this is different. This can vary person to person. OpenClaw changes all the time. It's very unstable, in my opinion. Maybe it's stable out, but the security stuff they've had to work on. Hermes actually don't have too many negative things to say about Hermes, except that it's in Python, which is not typed. And so that becomes an issue when you want to build really large systems. And I've just experienced that at scale based on the work that I've done. So the reality is this managed architecture will scale forever and in any direction. So no matter how big your second brain gets, it'll be fine to read in. And no matter how many skills you have, it'll be fine. No matter how many APIs you're connecting, it'll be fine. Of course, there's going to be little optimizations you want to do here and there, so it's not like bloated context, but it's not going to fall over itself and all of a sudden not work or get into a state that it cannot recover from. This type of setup here is self-healing, and it's also going to be self-learning. Now, when you have your AI gateway as well, that means, let's say we have some issues with Anthropic. We had some problems with Fable 5. It got taken away and Mythos is not coming out. So you might be thinking to yourself, I want to use something like a GLM that's come out recently. And so you can just switch over to GLM and use that. Or maybe you want to just use your codex. You want to use OpenAI's model, so you can switch over to OpenAI's models. This gives you maximum flexibility and then the ability to also stand this up. So that is my rant on the Jarvis agent thing. I think what happens is people make really cool demos using this setup, but this doesn't last too long. This is a good 6 months and you're going to run into all types of problems. This setup here, this is going to last a very long time because this is just following standard software development principles, and it's not really even up to you to mess it up. Once you put everything in GitHub and Vercel is going to manage all of the architecture and CI/CD and DevOps and all that stuff for you, all you need to basically do is have the channels that you want to interact with. So if it's over Slack or if it's over this voice cool UI orb UI looking thing, That's all you need to really worry about. And so you have a very clean separation here where you can modify these UIs, modify these channels, but your backend is not going to change much. Or you can modify your backend and update the second brain stuff and APIs, and it's not going to touch your core agent at all. So everything has a very clean separation. So hopefully this was helpful for you in this Jarvis architecture that everyone keeps rebuilding over and over again. So I will be doing more videos on this, maybe diving into like, how do I set up the second brain? How do I set up the skills, the APIs, getting into the use cases that I have as well. But I do want to keep it fairly light and high level here, because what I've noticed is if you do a tutorial on like how to set up a Jarvis managed agent, it doesn't even matter because it's going to change in 2 or 3 months. All the technology underneath changes, but these principles will stay the same pretty much. And once you have access to that repo, it'll just update itself. So there's no need to go in step by step and look at all that, because you'll just get it in real time when you are ready to set it up anyways. All right, so that does it for this. Hopefully this was super helpful and kind of just cleared up where we're going and what is the optimal architecture to go with for your Jarvis.